share with something with you that's going to help you no matter where you are. If you're evaluating currently a new CMMS, or you're in the process of implementing, or if you have a system that you want to improve. We find that the case in many of our clients. And you can see the title includes justification, et cetera, and best practices implementation. So when we get to the section on economic justification, a lot of that is your best practices that have been implemented in conjunction with CMMS. Always ask this question. Think about it in your own maintenance operation. If you own your maintenance operation as a business to make a profit or increase customer service, what would I do differently? Make a few notes there to yourself. But you've got to think about measurable results. You've got to think about it being profit-centered with a question mark and customer-centered with a question mark. Now you might say, well, profit-centered. Well, think about all the contract maintenance providers out there who are profit-centered. I submit to you, you can run it as a profit-centered business. And the next slide, it talks about CMMS, or Enterprise Asset Management, is our maintenance business system. And you can see we've got data coming in. We've got a sea of data, just tons of data, into our management information system, our maintenance information system. And what we're trying to get out is maintenance information for decisions, all types of decisions related to our business of maintenance. So always think of maintenance as your business and what you could do to make it better, to improve the various processes. And of course, the CMMS system, which is brings it all together. And think about your overall strategy. And here are a few things. I'm not going to go through all of these. I've got a lot of stuff on slides, particularly it has come from chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11 from my book. And but we've got to look at the true need for CMMS, and in italics underlined is the commitment, not only from maintenance, but from operations, but from the total operations has to be committed. Number 2, I'll talk about a little bit more later, but define those best practices that you need, and so forth. And we'll cover functional requirements, talking about the implementation process to measure that progress. Here's an example of the School Board for Maintenance Excellence in about 1997. It only had 18 categories, but you can see this particular organization, I call it the good, bad, and the ugly. The bad news is here is this company only had 403 baseline scores points out of a total at that time of 2,000. Now we have 3,027 categories. It had only 21% of the total possible points. This is the worst assessment or operation that we've ever seen. The good news is it became employee-owned. It's a 113-year-old company that makes ceramic insulators that you see on big substations. And right now it's still surviving, and it's doing much better than what you see here, which is now probably 15 years later. So this is our school board. We look at each item, and of course the CMMS system in this case is item P. We take a look at that and a number of other things. So it's very important to know where you are and try to get help. What help do you need? Well, here's a list of items that if you do use engineering or maintenance consulting help, you know, there are many good ones out there. And there are many CMS vendors that have experienced people. Not all of them do, but many do. So make sure that vendor works as a part of your team, just like they were a member of your staff. Definitely have well-defined deliverables. Use good project management techniques, and do these things and bring that outside support into your operation as a real part of your team. Now, has anyone ever seen this? This is a post turtle. And this post turtle needs help getting off of that post because he can't touch the ground to turn himself over. If you turn the turtle over on his back, he's going to be able to get back on his stomach and crawl away. But this turtle cannot. He's going to need help. So what I use this for is a laugh here. Help your team, and definitely help post turtles if you ever see one on a post like this that can't get down. Focus on all the basics. Our CMMS system, every modern system has these core modules, and most of you know what they are, so I'm not going to go through, but make sure that these things work together. That's what they're supposed to do, integrated together. I've noted planning and scheduling. Scheduling module. Often you have to add something to it. A system like Primavera, say in a shutdown, turnaround, major project type thing, as well as estimating. And we'll talk about our system, the ACE team process, which can help you with reliable planning time and reliable repair methods. But the key modules are very important. Here's where we get into the evaluation categories. And what we did with SIDERAR is look at functional requirements, technical requirements, software costs, implementation support, qualitative factors. And we'll go into these in a little bit more detail. But we have a rating level from 5 down to 1, and you can see how the scale goes. If everybody gets the best and get a 5, there's a possible of 5,000 total points. If everybody gets a 1, there are a possible 1,000 points. So that's how we look to evaluate the vendor. But we've got to look at specific functional requirements, and we've got to evaluate that from a cross-functional team. And we use this method by defining all the functional requirements. There's a list of about 150, and I think I've got a sample here for you. And we went through each one of those items. We narrowed it down to the top 5 vendors, and we went through this rating of the functional requirements. Remember, functional requirements is 40% of that total. So it's very important. Here's just another summary where we show functional requirements are 40%, technical 15%, software cost includes or excludes license continuation, updates, releases, implementation support, and training by vendor, and then the qualitative evaluation. This is a little new, and I'll show you the details of that later. So this is only 10% of the total evaluation points. And we did this actually with 25 vendors during the initial RFP. Again, this is rated 5 highest down to the lowest. And this was assigned for each vendor. Looking at the respective evaluation of the criteria. Now here are the qualitative factors, okay? And I'll let you just go through these. And again, these are important because ease of implementation, learning the system, reliability of the support and service, documentation, reputation of the vendor, ability to customize, ability to generate custom reports. That one's not as important as you might think now because there's a lot of different report writers out there, such as Crystal Report Writer and others, that you can do your own. But again, most systems come with various reports. On-site training, integration among modules, that's normally a given, on and on and on. Networking ability, compatibility with existing systems. The system that we evaluated was going to have to be integrated with SAP R3. So not every system back then was set up to to plug into SAP. Availability of suppliers database, service bureau type of support, and then other criteria defined by the team. So here, these had a weighted value as well. Now here we have those items listed, and again here we have the top 5. Okay, the top 5 systems that we evaluated, and you can see how they came out. This was the leader. This was a close second. So, you know, we found out that for the most part, the systems we were looking at, they weren't perfect, but they had most of the good qualitative things that SIDERAR needed. And then we take it a little bit further, and this is the final summary of functional requirements, technical requirements, software cost, implementation, total implementation with the CMS for the vendor, the qualitative evaluation rating. Okay, and so we come up with an overall point value. Okay, and here you can see again it was between CMMS-C and CMMS-A, and but we had to go through these details right here. We had to get all this information here, particularly the cost of software, the cost of conversions, customization, training, all the things related to implementation by each of the respective vendors. Okay, we want to look at economic justifications, and in Chapter 13 in the book, we cover those, and basically they'll come from craft productivity improvement, which we define productivity as craft utilization or wrench time, craft performance or efficiency, and craft quality, which is we call craft service quality. We did a session for EAM on the overall craft effectiveness, so that's still on their history, their archives, so you can take a look at that one. But there's a lot of value, gain value, from craft productivity improvement. Again, it requires best practices to get it achieved. MRO, spare parts inventory reduction, the value of increased uptime, capacity, throughput. As you'll see later, ironically, we didn't have it this time, and they couldn't calculate what the baseline uptime was, and we were just only looking at the critical steelmaking physical assets. Number 4, major projects completed sooner. But again, in the bullets, we've got to commit early to make sure we're committed to getting these best practices identified, developed, and particularly the 3 CMS databases: the parts inventory database, equipment master database, and then also the PM and predictive procedures databases. And we see many companies never getting these databases accurate. They think they can buy CMMS, they get the work order system working, and then all of a sudden they try to do reliability things and they don't have failure codes, for example, or they don't keep detailed information about failures. So these 3 databases must be maintained in good order. And that's, again, maintenance of the CMS's database. Now, briefly about the CMS benchmarking system, and I've included here rather than later. This is a process that simply, once you have a CMMS, it's not evaluating Maximo versus SAP R3. It's evaluating how well SAP is being implemented. You can use this with an existing system. Those of you that have an existing system, you can use this right now in its complete form. Those of you who are just starting CMMS, you probably would use this 6 to 9 months later after a go live situation. So, but it looks at 9 key areas that you can see here, all of which are very important, and all 3 through 8 and 9 are really best practices. Data integrity is the database integrity of those databases I just discussed. And what it does, it gives you a Class A, B, C, or D rating based on the points that you assign for each of the total 50 evaluation criteria. Okay, and this is an example of CMS data integrity. For example, the equipment asset history database is completed and accuracy is 98% or better. Same thing for the spare parts inventory master record. It's 98% accurate or better. Now, if you give it a yes, well, you give it 4 points. If you don't know, but you say, okay, it's probably, 70% accurate, so you might give it a 2. You might give it a 1, 2, or 3 based on your knowledge of how accurate it is or how complete it is. So again, this is not an exact science, but it is a way to evaluate progress on 50 items, and this is an interesting thing we do in most of our classes, our true workshops. So those of you who have a CMMS system that you're concerned about, I would recommend doing this benchmarking of it and seeing where you stand. And then, of course, it's going to document the gaps that you might need to focus upon. Okay, this is a little bit of the challenge that was facing SIDERAR. They currently had an in-house developed CMMS, and they also had, well, they had 7 plants all around Argentina. They also wanted to improve corporate-wide maintenance best practices, have a way to measure results, and ensure that the functionality of the new CMMS would fully support their maintenance improvement efforts. So what they did was request a complete benchmark review of the total operations at all the plants and to define best practices, and at the same time, it defined clearly the functional requirements for a world-class CMMS. Also, they had SAP R3, and they wanted to evaluate it as a possibility. But at the current time, they were only using the financial and the purchasing part of the SAP R3. And they had not even included inventory control on it, just the purchasing. So they had a link between inventory, purchase requisitions had to go to purchasing and be entered into SAP. It was not a fully integrated system, which is a benefit of an enterprise asset management system like SAP R3. So the approach I've discussed, we did the assessment at all 7 plants, provided recommendations, and it was a team effort with SIDERAR and the staff at both the plant and corporate level. We defined the functional requirements, as I said. It's a list of about 120 plus items. We developed a method to evaluate vendors, and we looked at the short list, which you saw, the top 5. Then we looked at SAP R3 at the plant maintenance and procurement module level. This was back in the late 1990s, so it was not as robust as it is now. And of course, we recommended a vendor, helped them with a plan, established a benchmarking system for them, and did those assessments at the plants. The last item here, we developed, of course, a scoreboard rating for each of the respective plants. And that simply is a baseline. It's not an absolute value. It's a baseline upon which to measure progress. And it's a very positive process. Okay, results. We showed them improvement opportunities for each plant, showed them improvement opportunities of well over $4 million. And this didn't even include the capacity throughput improvement through improved uptime. Improvements to existing planning and scheduling processes were needed. We introduced work measurement techniques such as the ACE-team process. We illustrated how to help them measure planning effectiveness. And I think we definitely increased coordination with operations because this was a team process throughout the evaluation process, because we interviewed the operational managers, the directors, the supervisors in operations who had to use CMMS. What they had before was just a green screen type situation, very, very archaic, so to speak. We defined some improved preventive predictive opportunities and also revision and upgrade of these procedures. And I think definitely greater support from the manufacturing, the steelmaking operations. And in turn, in time, increased compliance to the preventive and predictive schedules. A number of other ones. There was a need for improved storeroom and shop operations. There's some strategic storeroom master planning. I'll show you a picture of a staging area, but they really had a above average storeroom operation. The gentleman that helped us a lot was head of that, and he'd done a lot of good work, even with the old system. New storeroom procedures. We helped them identify better ways to measure inventory accuracy via cycle counting. So there's a number of benefits, to include corporate-wide measures across the 7 plants via corporate-wide metrics, etc. And last but not least, I mentioned before, we helped them establish their own unique maintenance excellence index. And I think we've covered that in previous sessions with eMaint, but it's simply a one-page Excel spreadsheet, and it's very easy to use, but it's based on performance goals, on critical metrics that are cross-functional. Many relate to operations. Many relate, of course, to the maintenance process. Here's an example. You see the picture below. This is the staging area, and their warehouses. They had numerous warehouses throughout, but in this case, they had $131 million worth of inventory, U.S. dollars, almost 136,000 SKUs, and we assumed a 10% inventory reduction, which is really the accepted policy, you know. And this is not even counting, you know, things like obsolete inventory, but a 10% inventory reduction, you should be able to stand on that with your CFO, and you should be able to achieve it fairly easy. I'll never forget one of the first assessments we did at a power plant up in North Dakota. One of the best storeroom managers you've ever seen had just finished an inventory rationalization project, and when we talked about 10%, he said, "Hey, no problem," and we included that in their case. That's with a medium-sized power plant. So this is one of the economic justifications. Now, next we'll look at carrying costs, and it's a It's a one-time, well, yeah, it's a savings that, in this case, we had $13 million in savings one time, and we used a 30% estimated carrying cost. So this is $392,000 plus savings per year after realizing that 10% inventory reduction. Now, you might say, well, what is our carrying cost? Well, the cost of capital, you've got to look at that. The cost of obsolescence can be a big one. Salaries, depreciation, insurance, record keeping, material handling, loss shrinkage, all these things. But industry-wide, and I've used this for many years, is 25 to 40%. So yours might be different, but whatever it is, you ought to show it. Again, it's not going to be the biggest number in many cases because you're not probably carrying $13 million worth of, well, $131 million worth of inventory, which they were doing, and they had the opportunity to save $13 million in reductions. Okay, just some of the ways that the new CMMS and best practices does provide these reductions. Well, most of you understand, we've got a listing for each asset or subsystem and system. Spare parts where used, parts interchangeability capability, identification of obsolete parts by type or by machine. Here we do get a better capability for part standardization, which is always a tough one, but it's going to help us in that aspect. Again, if you have multiple sites, you can have visibility of total parts on hand at other sites. I've seen Caterpillar plant out in Illinois, and they know what's in every Caterpillar plant in the United States. We need a good standard process for adding and deleting parts, which most people should have. And we want to have identifying quality spares and specifications. This is something that's often missing, is the real information about the specifications and other things related to engineering support. And then last but not least is there can be a corporate focus on measurable inventory reduction. We're not talking about squeezing the turnip, squeezing the blood out of the turnip. And I've seen that in a company. I was very proud they had $300,000 in inventory. And I turned around and talked to the planner, and I asked him about inventory. He said, oh, I solved that. I bought 2 of them. I used one, and I had the other stored right over here, and I saw a big pile of parts. And this is the gospel truth. Could not trust the system, so maintenance, for the most part, does what they need to do to do their job. Okay, here we talk about increased craft utilization, which is wrench time. And we said they could expect at least 10%. And here we assumed a 50% current wrench time going up to 60%. And for the most part, and I've got another slide showing this, it's been shown that normally without proactive planned maintenance, it's in the range of 30 to 40%. That's hands-on wrench time. Person at the job with the parts, doing the job, and completing right the first time. But we took a very conservative base of 50% to do our calculations, which I'll show you next. Now here are the calculations. And they had around 1,000 craft people, over 2 million craft hours total available per year, and an average of $14 a craft hour with fringes in this case. This is with their benefits added, which makes this a little bit higher than you would expect. And so they had a roughly $30 million in labor costs. Okay, now if you look at this at 50% wrench time, we're getting about 1,000 average wrench time hours per craft person. Okay, Now, if you look at it at 60% utilization, we're getting 1,248 per craft person. So if you look at the difference of these two, we've got 208,000 total hours of wrench time gained, and if we divide that number by the average at 50%, that's about 200 equivalent craft positions that we're going to have available to do work, okay? And that's part of the productivity factor. But the question I ask, what is your possible gain value? Here's a slide that I'll go to now, but this is the one I used in our overall craft effectiveness. But the important point here is at the very bottom is there's a lot of dollars, and they're real dollars that slip away when we waste skilled craft labor. No matter how inexpensive it might be, it's still needed in most cases for a lot of other things. Most people never have enough skilled labor, but again, this value came to about $6 million. But in the case of craft performance, we did not use craft performance gain, and that was just something I decided not to do. But again, the craft utilization are improved by good planning and scheduling, improved kitting, reservation of parts linked to work orders, better status information on parts on order, delivery dates, and also the ability to measure craft utilization effectively. Also improved online parts information, drawings, specifications, information for equipment, and last but not least, improved coordination with production and interface with process controls. That area. Okay. Again, this will be available for download from eMainte's library of a lot of good information. A couple points here. When we combine improving wrench time, craft utilization, and performance, it has a multiplier effect. We're getting more wrench time hours, and if we're getting more performance from those wrench time hours, that adds another another factor of more available time to do productive work. But we said, they can expect measurable results in the area of improving craft performance and contractor employees. This is one that we always try to emphasize. I'm doing a course on how to maximize the value of contract employees in Dubai in December, and that is a very important thing, to know and be able to provide good planning to the contractors and good plan times wherever possible. So it's very much applicable to contractors. And SIDERAR did have a number of contractors. Now here you can see it's a little bit different. We look at it in terms of direct craft hours gained because we combine both craft utilization and craft labor productivity. And you can go through this, but what this does, it raises the total up to 330 equivalent craft positions that we have gained value. Now this is not direct savings, but it is direct in the sense that if we are able to reduce contractors, if we're able to do preventive maintenance that we haven't done before, if we're able to do more in-house projects that are contracted, this is a real value. But in the book, you'll see some more details on this. But again, to be able to do this, you've got to have realistic planning times on all major PMs, all major inspections, plan repairs, and use a good methodology. And there are many historical standards, hysterical standards as I call them, guesstimates, best guesses by whomever. But we think that the ACE-team process is a way to bring a team of people together and develop a process for good, not only reliable estimated time, but it looks at reliability, it looks at repair methods, etc. That really makes for a pretty unique concept. Definitely continued training for overall craft skill levels, increasing motivation, work ethics, and it gives the company, craftspeople, technicians, contractors, very clear expectation of what is required, just as a schedule is an expectation for a day or for a week. An estimated time for a job is a shorter interval, and that is a clear expectation. And hopefully it is a reliable planning time. Excuse me. Also, standard job plans, and those are built, per a specific job. They become part of the standard job plan library or database. That's another database that the planners will build over time and be able to use parts of, all of, or change. And so that is a important database as well. Again, the planning time versus actual time is performance, and it evaluates our planning effectiveness as well as our performance of people and the status of progress on projects. If we're getting information back on a large project, for example, and we've got accurate man-hour requirements initially established, as the work order comes in, we can see the expended man-hours against the plan per the various segments of the project. So that gives us a way to monitor progress. One of the ways to monitor progress. Now, some other things we included was the savings of staff time for user-friendly system, a user-friendly system. Back then, it was a green screen system. It was very hard to use, and at that point in time in our evolution, everybody complained about it. And so, even though this amount of time, even though this is not a big dollar value, it is very important by having a system that everybody can use and everybody understands, even to the point of closing out work orders by the technicians, or having it integrated with barcoding or wireless devices. And so we did calculate a very small savings related to savings of staff time. Now, as I said before, increased uptime, utilization of critical steelmaking assets, that was not included in our evaluation, but it was there. We had made a request to them. It was not available, and so we made a request to the director of the of IE, and we had to wait on this information, for our final reporting. But in essence, the information we had well justified the decisions for expanding the new CMMS. Actually, it was the expansion of SAP. Those of you who've been wanting to answer, yes, it was the evaluation of using SAP, expanding it to its complete capability, and going forward. So here are the the total savings, a lot of dollars. It seems pretty obvious to somebody want to do something, but it required other than just buying the CMMS, and that's the important point. It required a lot of other best practices contributing just as much as the purchase of the CMMS. We also looked at hardware cost, and these are some of the numbers. You can look at that, but that's very important for everybody to know. Training cost, the internal cost of training time. We even calculated that just to see how much time away was going to be taken. We just did that just to illustrate. It's going to take time away for people to be trained. And also external training cost, both on-site training and then instructors, et cetera, et cetera. Software cost, we did this for both systems. Again, CMMS X was Maximo at that time, which was a good while ago. And cost summary. Other notes on the cost of seats back then and the South American or the South American market. Also interfaces, that could possibly evolve, such as interfacing with the CAD engineering drawings, possibly integration to process control, interfaces to condition monitoring systems. Those would also have to be evaluated. And at that time, they were not really concerned about that, but eventually they might have been.